Let's talk about some simple habits to get better at making games because, let's be honest, who doesn't want that? From when I started teaching myself how to make games in the Half-Life editor when I was like 19 years old, to traveling across the planet to work at Relic, to moving my family down to California to work at Blizzard, I've been there and I've experienced so many different incredible ways to make games. Everything from these really big teams like Diablo and World of Warcraft to the more mid-sized teams like Dawn of War, and all the way down to the really small ones like we were at Clay. Honestly, what I've seen is that there are some common habits that these folks, some of the best game developers in the world use to make those games. And that's what I want to share with you here today. 10 habits, call it. 10 actionable things that you can do that will make you a better game developer. Let's roll straight into it with the first one. Know why you're doing it. Being really clear with yourself, not just about why you want to make games, but also why this game is really important and is going to help you so much. Ask yourself the question, what is it to you personally? What do you want to achieve when making a game? Is it to make a bunch of money? Is it to learn a new skill? Is it simply because you want to create something and have some art and show it off? By understanding and being really clear about what your goal is, you can frame the complexity of the game that you want to do, what the features are, what you want to focus on. If your goal is just to build a system that you've never done before, like a lobby system for multiplayer, then you don't also need to make a world-class real-time strategy game. You could just make a little 1v1 shooter with super basic graphics and release it for free. That would accomplish your goal. The clearer you can be with the goal of each game when you first start, what it is you as a developer are looking to get out of it, the more effective you can be about your decision making when it comes to deciding on what feature to work on or what to do next. Which conveniently leads us straight into our next point, which is chop down the biggest tree first. One of the hardest things in game development can be just kind of knowing what to work on next, right? But I once had a producer who made that really easy. He described it as chop down the biggest trees first. Let me give you kind of an example to make sense of that. Imagine that your game you want to build is like a big forest of trees. Not actually a forest of trees, but each tree represents a feature. Each one of those trees is a problem or a feature or an idea or a piece of art that you need to build to add to your game. And if your job is to clear those trees out, it can be really tempting to start with all of the small ones. Let's say you need a customizable weapon system for your game to let players, make their own guns. Well, it can seem like the right thing to do there would be to start by making a bunch of those weapon parts. Make a big list of art assets to make, guns, attachments, scopes, all that. It seems like the right thing to do to start building those things because it's kind of the easiest thing. The problem is that it isn't the biggest tree. Those are a bunch of small trees that might look like a big one, but they really aren't. What you'll find is after you've made a bunch of weapon parts, you still have to build the system to make them all go together. You have to figure out what stats go on each attachment. How does the player actually make those changes? How do they turn things on and off? How do the changes affect the gameplay? If you've already built a bunch of art, you'll try to make the system work for the art you've made, or you'll probably actually realize that the art you've made isn't going to work for the system and have to throw all that stuff out and start over. In this example, the system is the biggest tree. By starting with the system itself, you can then build just a few small weapon pieces to add to it, see if that works before going too far and making too much art or content. Look for the biggest tree and cut that down first. When you have a big problem ahead of you, and let's be honest, it feels like game development is just one big problem, it can be tempting to just hurl yourself into the problem and work at it endlessly. The problem here is that this isn't really how our brains work best. They aren't good at just hammering away at a problem again and again and again and thinking that we're going to fix it. Our brains need time to rest, to reset. My favorite thing is to go pens down, get away from the computer, and go for a walk in the forest near my house. This lets the other parts of your brain, which by the way are actually way more creative and powerful than your conscious part, work at the problem for you. You come back with fresh eyes, a new perspective, and probably a new insight into the problem. What you'll find is you probably now get more done in less time than if you had have just sat there hammering your face against the screen. Another common problem in games is how easy it is to make a game far too complicated really, really quickly. You see it a lot. It's like the wouldn't it be cool if problem. The hard thing is that in games, everything kind of is possible. I like to tackle this by having a very specific core mechanic for every game and judging every new idea against that core mechanic. Take Peak, for example. The core mechanic in the game is climbing with friends, and everything is built to support that. The stamina system ties into it, the way you help your friends up, all the items that you can find. It probably would have been really easy to add too much to the game, like guns or grenades or power-up jumps or whatever. But you can tell that they didn't, because everything comes back to and builds on that core mechanic of make climbing with friends fun. The core mechanic of Mario is a jumping mechanic. Minecraft is a block destruction and placement mechanic, and everything builds on top of that. Try to keep your ideas focused in on a single core mechanic and focus on building on top of that, and use it as your test for wouldn't it be cool if. In his book on writing, Stephen King shared that he writes every single day, even on holidays. He's created a routine where he wakes up, eats, walks, then sits down and writes for a block of time every single day. Not only does this allow him to pump out what seems like a crazy number of books, it also keeps things very simple for him. And it can work for game dev too. Carve out a specific window of time each day for focused at your computer work. This is especially important and helpful if you're an indie developer or if you're like trying to make a game and still have a full-time job. It's about creating an environment where you can pretty easily and quickly get into a flow state, which makes it really easy for you to make forward progress towards building something. And hey, if it worked for Stephen King, it might just work for you too. I hate to break it to you, but the reality is you're going to remake parts of your game. It's really rare that everything you implement will last the duration of development. The more modular you can make stuff, the easier it is to then remake them. So, for example, if you want to say, give players a flashlight, well, instead of adding that to the player's game object itself and just kind of hacking it in there, add it as its own thing. Then write the system that attaches it to the player's game object. You'll probably benefit from building an item system that supports attaching things like this to the player, which then lets you create a number of different items. By building it in this way, you can now more easily add a new type of thing for the player to carry, maybe a bucket, and you've made it easier to modify the way that flashlight works later or cut it entirely. Game development, good game development, is all about iteration. Professional developers know this in their bones because the best games we've worked on have a lot of iteration in them. Oftentimes on Diablo or World of Warcraft, we would rebuild entire huge systems in the game because we weren't happy with how they worked or they weren't achieving the goal. And I don't just mean small things like the layout of a level, but huge sweeping changes. Like I remember that adventure mode in WoW got rebuilt pretty aggressively, pretty close to release because we weren't happy with how it was working. And this was only possible because of how the game was built in a modular way. Just because you're not in prototype phase anymore doesn't mean you should stop prototyping. As you start working on a new feature for the game, even if you're in what you might think of as, mid-production or something, I'd highly recommend you find a way to embrace the prototyping methodology to figure out what it is you want to do with that feature. A good example here is the horrific visions for World of Warcraft. When we started, I built like 3 or so different prototypes of what the end result would play like before we really started making anything. One of the challenges we had with making the missions in Dawn of War was our timelines were always built around the expectation of kind of like a one and done mentality. We basically had a month to build a mission and then never come back to it. Don't get me wrong, the missions turned out okay, but the ones where we had the chance to build it once and then start over, they always turned out better. Even when you're in full production on a game, even when you think you know everything about it, give yourself permission to prototype a new idea in a way that can be easily taken out and rebuilt or build alongside of it. Your game will be so much better for the learnings that you get by doing it that way. Spreadsheets are the best. I honestly can't think of a game that I've worked on that didn't use spreadsheets. Diablo lived and breathed on spreadsheets. It was like the beating heart of that game. We used them for storing the data that defined pretty much everything in the game rather than, say, data tables in Unity. Spreadsheets let you do amazing things like formatting to keep your data readable, but Even better, they have built-in formulas. Things like lookup tables, easy math stuff, all that is built into the program without you or an engineer having to rewrite it into the game engine itself. The crafting system in Diablo was one big spreadsheet that just used lookup tables to pull from another sheet and then rebuild itself whenever we made changes to the core numbers. Games can often come with a lot of data, and manipulating that data it's how we balance the game. The easier it is for you to read and edit that data, the better the game will be balanced. This seems like a simple one, but I can't reinforce how much I love spreadsheets. You don't have to plan to come up with every idea yourself. Professional developers know the best way to come up with something new is to actually start with something that already exists and build upon it. Let's be honest, Warcraft isn't unique. It's orcs versus humans. This is a trope which has been around forever. Or even StarCraft, it's definitely inspired by other things. The prestige system in Diablo that we implemented was heavily inspired by the one that we were playing in Borderlands. Sure, on occasion, something entirely new comes along, and that's exceedingly rare and is honestly usually the result of a lot of other work that's been done that suddenly unlocks what seems like a new idea, but is really just inspired by a bunch of the work that that person has done up to that point. One of the best ways I've seen this done is it's X meets Y, or it's X with Y type thinking. For example, let's say you want to make a game, it's Super Mario Brothers with survival mechanics, or it's Hades meets Escape from Tarkov. These are really broad, but you can also narrow that down a bit with everything that you do. Like, it's a jumping platformer with hunger mechanics. This is a wonderful way of building something new, and you don't have to copy and paste everyone else's work in order to contribute to it. Since like Relic, I have a pad or a notebook, and at the beginning of the day, I write down a list of what it is that I need to do next, and I put a little box next to each item. As I complete each one, I tick the box or I scribble it out. At the end of the day, it's easy for me to see what's done and what needs to be done tomorrow. The next day, you keep that same list going. Sometimes I make a new one using what was left over from the last one. This makes it really easy to keep a good understanding of what the most important thing next is to work on. Finally, get started. For the love of God, stop watching YouTube, stop researching, stop testing new tools or evaluating engines. The best way to start making games is to start making games. There's this wonderful quote from Steven Spielberg about, people would always ask him about, well, how do I be a filmmaker? He says, you pick up a camera, you film something, and then you show that film to people. Congratulations, you're a filmmaker. Everything after that point is just tech and budget. So go get a game engine, start making games, and show those games to people. Congratulations, you're a game developer. Thanks for watching. I hope you like this one. I have a Patreon. It's right there. Go click on it. See you next time.